You are listening to a brand new episode of Gayside Stories with Trilificent, where the gay shit goes. Thank you so much for joining me for another week. Remember, you can listen to this show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, your favorite podcast app, or on the website, GaysideStories.com/shows. Hashtags, remember to use them, GaysidePod and Pods by QPOC when you're live tweeting, when you're posting about the show, whether it's on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. Please do use those hashtags. The Gayside Pod just helps me find conversations or things that you say. The Pods by QPOC hashtag, of course, is the hashtag that I curated for podcasts with hosts that are queer and people of color, so black and brown people, essentially non-white people. So please use both of those. Send in any questions or compliments, show topic ideas. If you want advice about things, because I do give good advice, you can ask my friend Naj, aka Chartreuse Disaster. So send that stuff in. The email address is gaysidestories@gmail.com. Last thing, you guys, rest in peace, rest in power, rest in heaven to Aloysius of the No Sherlock podcast. You may remember hearing him here on episode 51. So I want to say maybe two and a half weeks ago, the guys posted on their Instagram page that he had passed away. So if you haven't, go back and listen to that episode 51 with him on this show. And go and show those guys at No Shit Sherlock some love and some support. Much light and all positive vibes and all of that stuff to those guys, because I really can't imagine. So I'm going to say let's have a moment of silence for Aloysius. Again, rest in peace to him. And this episode was one of my favorite to record. I got to collaborate with someone that I admire very much. Very good conversationalist. We had a blast. I'm excited for you guys to hear it. So let's start the show. All right. I am here with Jamie of the Arroz con Chicken podcast. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me.
Definitely. Thank you for having me.
You have big things in the works, so I really appreciate you carving out a little bit of time to come on this little rinky-dink show. It means a lot to me.
No, definitely. I'm excited. I'm happy to be here. Definitely.
So before we get started, why don't you tell people a little bit about Arroz con Chicken?
Claro, of course. So I have a podcast and a website entitled Arroz con Chicken. And kind of the tagline we use is, it's the podcast that your abuela warned you about. So with Arroz Chicken, or Arroz con Chicken, it's a podcast that deals with entertainment, news, gossip, music, all these different things, but it has like a Hispanic, Latino, Caribbean type feel to it. So our segments are Hispanic themed and Caribbean themed, and we deal with, like, for example, every week we have a Yolanda Saldivar of the week. Which Yolanda Saldivar, if you've ever seen the movie Selena, you know that Yolanda Saldivar is a woman who actually took Selena's life or whatever. So whenever we have a Yolanda Saldivar, that's somebody that we have to read to filth every single week or whatever. Now, with the podcasting, we were doing it regularly in the past, but now we're doing it, trying to do at least one episode a month, because we've got a lot of stuff going on. My co-host is going to have a baby next month.
Yeah, and shout out to Evelina.
Yes, to Evelina. Evelina's gonna have a baby, so yeah, we're super excited about that. But it's just a lot of fun. So yeah, that's basically it.
So, what made you start the podcast? Like, what made you want to get into the landscape?
Of course. So I had been online, and I think we've all been kind of online for a long time, but I had originally a website called Noticias Chismes, which means news and gossip. And it basically dealt with news and gossip, the African-American field or area, as well as the Hispanic landscape. And that was, I want to say, like 2005, 2006. And so it just then I kind of moved to Twitter, and then it just kind of transitioned to podcasting. So that's kind of what it is,
Okay, that's what's up.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I enjoy you guys, and hopefully, I mean, I know life be lifing, so if you guys have some laps, then we'll just have to deal. But I'm hoping that you guys can have a little bit of regularity, just because I like the show.
Well, thank you,
Like
definitely.
it's one of those shade fest type podcasts that you just can't help but listen to. I'll turn it on like, now what is Jamie gonna say on this episode? And the shade is so effortless.
Exactly. It's like that. I mean, that's probably the best way to put it. Yeah, I can't even I can't even lie. But yeah, definitely. Thank you. I guess I'd say.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do a little icebreaker before we get into the main topic. So we're going to start off with the queer query.
Question.
First question. What is your dream collaboration? And this is not limited to you or podcasting.
Perfect. All right. So my dream collaboration, if it were with a person in particular, I would say probably Freshalina from the Crunktastical website from years ago. Yes, and from Neck of the Woods podcast, because I think she's brilliant. I think she's amazing. She's very relatable. She's very humble. And I think we would produce some really good stuff there. I have a lot of followers online that I would want to collaborate with and do different things with. When I look at my followers online, like I have a follower from California you all may follow named Savvy Fatty, and yes, I love her. She's to me, she's brilliant, and I think that she should be working in television or whatever. So if I could like do something with her, that would be amazing. My ultimate goal years ago, what I really wanted to do was to write for like telenovelas and write scripts and stuff. So if I could work with, like a channel like Telemundo or Univision or something, then that would be like a network that I would want to collaborate with.
Okay, that's what's up.
So how about you, though? Let me ask you.
I was thinking about that. I think off the top of my head, at least one, because as you said, I have a lot of followers and peers in the podcast community that I would love to collaborate. There's tons of just people, like celebrities and whatnot, that I would love to see collaborate. But for myself, I think one of my dream collaborations would be with Kiss and Tell Radio or networks.
Yeah.
So they're out in LA, but I don't know. I just like their style and their format. So it's with Jace Barron and Char Says So, and they just have a very unique way of talking about the news, and then they have their topics, and they have this bell in studio that they're always dinging at certain points. So I think that would be a lot of fun. So that would definitely be one of my dream collaborations.
Definitely. I like that. I think that would be really good.
So next question. Could you openly date a porn star? Why or why not? Or former porn star?
Well, let's see. Could I? Yeah, definitely. To me, it's just a job. It's just a career. I mean, as long as the person is, there's an understanding between us that this is work and this stays at work, and this is, and what we do at home is different. Like, for example, there's some porn stars, like male porn stars and female porn stars, that I follow and that I've, been fans of over the years, and they are married and they wear their wedding rings and stuff in their videos and stuff. So, I mean, to me, it's just a job. I remember with one of my exes, God, it's always a story time with me. I remember with one of my exes, he came to me one night and he was in cosmetology school at the time, and he said, Jamie, what do you think about me being a dancer or whatever? And I said, I mean, it's I don't have an issue with it. I think you'd be good at it. You have to get some rhythm first, but I think you would be good at it. Aesthetically, I mean, you have the look. He was big, corn-fed, stocky. I just naturally muscular. So I was like, yeah, this would definitely work. I mean, because you're just gonna bring that money home and bring it to our house. So yeah, definitely.
That makes sense, and I would agree. I don't know. It's not a big deal to me, I guess. And I tweeted this, and one day I'm going to dig into this deeper on this show, but specifically for gay men as a whole, I think we have a really quote unquote interesting view on porn stars, because a lot of times you see a lot of praise for porn. Like we're men. On some level, you identify as a man if you are gay, and we love porn. It's just it is what it is. A lot of times, porn is our introduction into being gay. Even if it's straight porn, when you realize, oh, I'm looking at the man's butt a lot more than I'm looking at the whole action, I could not like women that much. But then at the same time, you get on Twitter and you get on Instagram and you see people constantly shading porn stars, and you see all of this shade for OnlyFans and all of this kind of stuff. And it's just like, I don't get it. Like, how can you love porn, but you want to shade people that make it? That doesn't make sense to me. Unless it's a porn star that you like.
Well, that's true, because a lot of people have their favorites and they're like, oh, well, in their eyes, that person can do no wrong or whatever. But Let me ask you, where do you think that comes from, the shade towards because we see it all the time on the timeline, the shade towards the OnlyFans accounts and all these different things. Where do you think that comes from?
I think it's a fake puritanical mindset. Where it's like, no matter what I'm doing in my personal life, I could be out here letting any and everybody come and use me as a cum dumpster. But the image that I'm going to project is, I'm very savvy about my sexual conquests. And so porn is a whole different beast. I also think that a lot of people equate porn with not only just being bad, but being a hoe. And so there's a conflation between, okay, this is my job, I'm a sex worker, versus I'm just some regular hoe off the street. Not that there's anything wrong with being a regular hoe off the street, because a lot of y'all wouldn't know how to have sex if you didn't come across a hoe in your lifetime. Or you could be the hoe, which again, there's no shade. Hoes make the world go round. Let's be honest. But I think at the end of the day, it's that fake puritanical sex needs to be within the confines of this box as far as social acceptance. Even though, again, we're gay and we're hypersexual, it's almost like I need some kind of way to judge this. So I'm going to make it seem like it's a bad thing. What about you?
That's a good way. Open up a whole can of worms. But to me, when I think of my followers and the people whose podcasts I listen to, who shade the OnlyFans and the porn stars, sometimes they may not necessarily be the most conventionally attractive people. When I think about them, sometimes. So it's like, is it a jealousy type thing? I think it can be both. I think it can be this puritanical, hey, I'm better than you, or at least I'm more chaste, more pure. But I also think if people were willing to pay them to watch them have sex, I don't think that they would be as shady, you know?
Yeah, I agree with that. As far as OnlyFans specifically, I 100% agree with that. I think it's either I want to judge because I get up and I swipe my card at whatever building and I get my money the quote unquote traditional way, or it's jealousy. I wish I could be doing that. I wish I could do something that I like to do, i.e. have sex, and get paid for it. Or not even, because not all OnlyFans people even have sex. It's just a lot of them just do a lot of thirst traps.
Exactly. And muscle worship and different stuff like that.
Muscle worship, taking video of them showering. Like, not all of them cross XXX lines, but again, it's all about judgment or jealousy. J&J is one or the other a lot of times, because to me, I'm like, okay, you getting a coin. Cool.
Now, let me ask you, I have that question. That was a really good question, because it's kind of opened up some other questions that I kind of thought about. Let me ask you, do you subscribe to any OnlyFans accounts?
I have.
Okay.
I don't have like an ongoing subscription because, well, I'm not going to say that because that probably is cheating the system a little bit. But
yeah.
But I have. I mean, ain't no shame. Like, A lot of it, you can eventually, it may hit Tumblr. And there's a lot of content that I didn't even know they had an OnlyFans until it hit Tumblr. And I was like, well, let me just click play on this.
Exactly. And so that's my thing, is that I've never subscribed or even really been on the website, but I would definitely, because there's a couple porn stars that I like, and I'm like, okay, I see that they have an OnlyFans account, so maybe I'll, treat myself, to a month or a couple months of content, subscription. So
right, like I don't think it's that big of a deal. Again, we watch porn, and can we be honest?
Please, yes.
A lot of times, the amateur stuff, the OnlyFans stuff, is better than the produced stuff.
Exactly.
With the weird storylines and the weird editing, and a lot of times they just throw two guys together that don't have a lot of passion. It's like, yeah, okay, we can get it up and we can get it on, but there's no passion. Like, they don't really have chemistry. Mm-hmm. At least when you get on OnlyFans, listen, they put on a show.
Mm-hmm.
Or MyVidster, or whatever the case may be. I mean, I don't have a problem paying people for content. And that's whether there's podcasts that I'm a Patreon to. Shout out to Baby Boy Podcast.
Yes. Yeah.
There's artists, like graphic artists, that I buy their stuff. Or if they have a Patreon that is within my budget, I might kick them a few coins. Because I believe in paying people for their services. And to me, OnlyFans is no different. Okay, it's sex, but again, like, we all do it. Mm-hmm. We all like to use our kibbles and bits and have a good time. So what's the big deal?
There you go.
But that's just me.
That's the thing, is that with that question, that was a really good query question, because we could have gone on for a long time. That could have been its own show.
It actually will be.
Definitely. I look forward to that. So the question that I had was, what are your thoughts on people who mostly date outside their race?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think people who mostly date outside, like make it a point to date outside their race, they have some internal issues that they need to work out. I'm not necessarily saying that they're anti their own race, because that may not be you could be pro another race and not necessarily anti yours. You just hold that other race to a higher standard, maybe a higher beauty standard, maybe a higher social standard. And you think that elevates you to a point that you could not get with your own race. I'm a firm believer in fall in love with who you want to fall in love with, lick whatever ass you want to lick, do whatever it is that you want to do. But when you make it a point to not only date outside your race, but make sure everyone knows that you date outside your race, because we can be honest, a lot of times they go hand in hand. It's not just I am a man and I like to date white girls. It's I date white girls because these black bitches, or these black females, you know what I'm saying? It's never just I date my white women and go, or I date my white boys and go. Now on the gay side, it can go 50-50. Like sometimes I see black guys minding their business with their white partners, and it's other black gays attacking them for no reason. It's just like, they're just over there living their best life with their Caucasian partner. Like, why are you mad? You mad because you want to be with them, but that's no reason to attack them.
That's true.
So I think it just depends on how they present it. If it's just I date whoever I want to date and I enjoy it and I go, cool. But if it's a thing where you can tell there's a lot of internalized issues with their own race, where they cannot date outside of their race without putting their race down, then they definitely need to go see Molly's therapist from Insecure.
Yeah, definitely.
What about you? What are your thoughts?
So I tried to look at all sides of that question before I even posed it. I basically agree with you. As long as the person's like, okay, I'm just dating this person, I like them or whatever, but not necessarily excluding people of their own race or saying, hey, I only date white guys or I only date Mexican guys or whatever. If they just happen to fall in love with the person, then I don't have an issue with that. The thing is that it could have to do with geographic location as well. So, for example,
that's true.
Where I'm from in Kentucky, there aren't a ton of gay black people. I mean, I'm involved with Kentucky Black Pride, woo-woo. And so with us, I kind of know the majority of the gay black people in this area or whatever, and we're friends. And I've talked to some of them and gone out with some of them. But I think about my last ex, and my last ex was white. It wasn't necessarily, hey, the exclusion of black people. It's just this just happened to be who, I was attracted to at the time or whatever. So I just kind of think about it like that.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense, because I think I noticed that probably in the last 2 years or so, because people's Grindr, Jacked, whatever, their experiences are different. Or even just in my travels, like I used to, at an old job I had, I used to go to Alaska a lot, and I went to the West Coast and to the North, and I noticed how things were flipped. Like here in Houston, most of the niggas, most of the black guys are on Jacked. Mm-hmm. And the Latinos and white and some other ethnicities and races are on Grindr. But when I go up north, it's like the opposite. I get on Jacked and I'm like, well, I don't ever remember seeing this many white people on Jacked. Get on Grindr and it's like Freaknik. And it's like, okay, wait. Wow. It's like, okay. So I definitely agree that geographic location plays a big role in that.
Mm-hmm. Now, kind of a quick follow-up, then we'll get into the main topic here. But with this, let's say you were dating a guy who, let's say he's Hispanic, he's Latino, and you all have been going out for a couple months or whatever, and everything's going well, but you notice that there's some aspect of fetishism, like he only dates black guys, and he makes comments like, oh, when we get home, I want you to fuck me with that big black dick or whatever. Like, how do you handle that?
Ooh. And see, I would hope that that's something that I gleaned before getting into a consistent situation, because that kind of stuff is a turnoff for me. Mm-hmm. Like, I live in Houston. You guys know where Houston is, hopefully. And there's a huge Mexican, Latino, I say Mexican because we're close to the Mexican border.
Yeah.
And whenever I have somebody hit me up with that kind of stuff, I'm just like, ignore, delete, block, because it's such a huge turnoff. So, to be honest, I couldn't even see myself getting into a situation like that. I don't even really want to meet anybody like that in person. Like, as soon as they message me, hey, daddy, give me that big black dick or something to that, I'm just like, Matter of fact, you know what's funny about that? I just recently had somebody message me. I don't know what their race or ethnicity was because they didn't have a picture or anything, but I assume they weren't black. And they messaged me, and the first message, it was like, I love nigger cock. And I was like,
oh wow, okay.
Exactly. So that I just can't see myself being in that type of letting it get to the point where we're dating and have dated for months, because more than likely, if that's how you feel, you're going to exhibit it very early on. And if I'm lucky, maybe even in the initial stages of communication. And that's something that I can remove myself from, because that's not my ministry.
Exactly. And I was just going to say, that type of stuff typically shows itself pretty early. Like, I'm online, like, if in Asia, the big website is called, or the big app is called Blued. So over there, that's where all the guys are on. And so I'm talking to all these guys, get messages or whatever. And then when I look at some of the messages, it's like, oh, let me see that big black cock or whatever. I heard all black guys have big cocks and stuff. And I'm like, I'm really not even interested in that. I just want to know about what the gay scene is like in the city, just different stuff like that,
Right.
So,
like I say, it's a turnoff. It
really is.
It makes me feel like you at the grocery store picking out a piece of meat.
Exactly.
Like, oh no, I don't know that pork shoulder's a little too small. Give me the big one. It's like, I'm a whole person. Thank you so much.
Exactly.
Well, those were very interesting questions and answers. It was a lot of tangents and places where we could dig deeper, but that's not going to happen on this show. Let's get into the main topic, yeah?
Definitely, yeah.
So, I've seen this, and I'm sure you have too, Jamie, a lot on the internet, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatnot. And there's always a war of words when it comes to the word thick and how it applies to people's bodies. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, why not talk about it? And
course.
you were actually the first person that came to mind when I fleshed this out, because I know we've had some conversation in the past about thick men and whatnot. So I'm curious and excited to get into this, and let's just peel back some of the layers and see what we come up with.
Definitely.
So to start off, what's your personal definition of what it means to be thick?
Oh wow, that's a very complicated, complex question, but I'll try to kind of simplify my answer. Honestly, to me, I think of the terms thick and stocky interchangeably, at least from my sensibilities. So I think of someone who is stocky is going to be a guy or thick is going to have broad shoulders, firm, well built chest, big legs, not and a little, and kind of a chubbiness to him, but that he can either be, muscular based on going to the gym, or he can just have a naturally muscular physique. But the biggest things for me, biggest components for somebody who's thick or stocky is, broad chest, broad shoulders, and like nice firm legs, I guess you'd say.
Okay, that makes sense. My answer is very similar. First and foremost, I want to say that it is subjective, obviously. Everyone's idea of what thick is different, which is why it's a bone of contention and why we're having this discussion to begin with. Mm-hmm. But to me, I think it's a spectrum. And I think on one end of the spectrum, it's kind of like a chubby muscular thing. So it's, like you said, the natural musculature, but there's some thickness, there's some girth, some weight, to the point where it's not six packs, it's not where you can see veins, low body. It's definitely not a low body fat percentage type deal. Mm-hmm. But you can see that they have a well built frame just from genetics, or maybe they were in the gym, maybe they used to be in the gym, whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And then on the other end, I think it's just flat out chubbiness, and they may have a little muscle, maybe not, but it's kind of like a proportioned chubbiness. So chubby in the legs and the torso, like from chest, their waist, but it's still shapely to a degree. Mm-hmm. My quick brand on that would be bellies and buns. Belly and bun, then I say you thick.
There you go.
So how do you feel about thick men personally?
Oh, me? Oh, I'm all about them. Yeah. Yes, I like thick men. I enjoy them. I'll say.
Come on with that huskiness in your voice.
Well, listen, it comes and goes when I'm passionate about something.
I see. Yes. Passion. I hear it.
Sí, la pasión me encanta. All right.
Yes.
All right. So, I mean, I enjoy thick men. To me, that was. And I kind of go back and forth. It depends on the person, obviously. But that was always my ideal. Like, I think about when I'm out, let's say I'm out at the gym, or if I'm at the store or whatever, or we're out somewhere and I see a thick guy or a group of guys, hanging out or whatever, then the thicker guy is typically what's going to catch my eye. Now, as I've gotten older, I've, kind of broadened that as well. So there are some kind of swimmers build guys in there, some other types, but typically it's thick men that I like.
Okay. Personally, I love a thicksel. I love a muscular, thick man. But I do appreciate the whole spectrum. And I say that because one could ask, or one could probably peruse through my Instagram following and be like, oh, no, this is your type. And it's like, I don't necessarily have a type, because I've kind of been with some of everything. I will say, though, I think my first boyfriend kind of spoiled me, because he was short and thick, and so I kind of have a soft spot for the shorter, thicker guys. Mm-hmm. But the other thing about that, though, is, like, I haven't been with a lot of thick men because they're usually kind of weird towards me.
Really?
And it's off-putting. Like, I can't help it. Like, thick guys that I'm like, okay, this is like, I could see him writing me, or vice versa. Okay. And they're the type that's like, hey, sexy, what you doing, sexy? Oh, you eating peas and rice, sexy? Ooh, sexy. And it's just like, oh.
Oh, my God.
Or there's something about them that's unflattering. And this may sound completely and utterly superficial, but hey, I walk in my truth. I speak my truth. And if you have a problem with it, I don't know. Call Tyrone, I guess.
There you go.
But the thick guys that I've come across, either they do that weird thing where every sentence is kind of like a text message signature, where it's sexy on the end of every sentence, or they show me a picture and I'm just like, this. I don't know how you got me to go from 100 to negative 3,000, but you have accomplished that. Like I had this guy, for example, and we were chatting. Now all his pictures, I was like, okay, he's cute, he's chubby, I'm with it. Like I would let him suck my dick. Like it is what it is. And then he sends me this picture of like his tongue.
No.
And it looked like he had been eating powdered donuts, and I was just like,
oh, that's thrush, girl. No.
I was like, yuck.
Oh my God.
And so those are usually my experiences with thick guys.
So for me, I had kind of and I said, I know earlier that I really like, just a second ago, that I really like thick guys. But today, like 2 hours ago, I had an interesting experience. So if you all know me, you know I like to go to the saunas, the bathhouses, the gay theaters and different stuff. So I was there at the gay theater today, and there were like 6 or 7 guys there. And then this guy walks back, and he's about, maybe I'd say 5'8", very muscular, broad shoulders, tattoos and everything. And he goes inside the booth, and when you put your card in, the light comes on to let somebody know, hey, there's somebody inside or whatever. And he goes in and he leaves his door open. And he kind of stands there for a second, and I'm on my phone, not really paying attention or whatever. But yeah, he was my ideal guy, but something about him I wasn't attracted to. Maybe it was the fact he was wearing sandals. Maybe it was the fact he was looking at these huge dildos outside. I don't know what exactly it was about him, but I was like, no, I didn't really like him. And so another guy came in, kind of this country guy. He wasn't as stocky, but he was solidly built or whatever, maybe 40s or whatever. And I ended up, hooking up with him, and I had a really good time with him. So it's like, for me, it kind of varies, even though that's my kind of ideal guy. It depends on the individual person, I guess I'd say.
Yeah, the individuality plays a huge role. I definitely agree with that. But on the other end of the spectrum, let's talk about the community a little bit.
Yeah.
So how do you think the gay community, I'm talking specifically about men, because I really don't think women have as many body issues as men have. I'm not saying they don't have any, but I think they don't have as much. So for gay men in the gay community, how do you think that the term is used and accepted or not accepted, and how do you think that the community as a whole feels about thicker men?
Of course. So I kind of draw, and I hate to kind of draw this based on, or reference this based on ethnicity or race, but I remember like when in maybe 5-10 years ago, well, 15 years ago, when we were on like Adam for Adam and Manhunt and all these different websites, and I would see black guys on there, and they would say, hey, I'm thick or whatever, and it'd always be a heavy set guy, with man breasts and bent over with his ass hanging out in a thong or something. And that was the definition of thick that I equated, or that I subscribed to for years, that's what it was, just based on the black guys that I saw. And I didn't really see anybody else besides these, more effeminate bottom guys, black guys, use that term. Now it seems like it's more widespread, and that when whites use it, it can mean like kind of anything. And I think the term in general has kind of taken on anything. So, honestly, I don't know. I don't know if it's, because I have a degree in linguistics, so I don't like to police how people use language and how they use it. I I guess if somebody says that they're thick or if they or enjoy guys who are thick, I would ask them personally, hey, what does that mean to you? Because to me, it means this. I just want to check and see if that's what it means to you. I guess the only issue that it comes into for me, or that comes up, is when people are like, "Hey, I like thick guys" or whatever, and then they kind of downplay or they talk negatively about other guys, and that's kind of the only issue that I would have with it. But kind of, what are your thoughts on that?
So I agree with what you're saying. I think that, how do I put this? To be honest, I think it's a buzzword.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because it's so subjective, everyone has a different idea of what thick means. But as far as the community, I don't think we've truly gotten to a place where thick men are really accepted. And I say that because when you look at online publications and shows and all of that type of stuff, it's very little representation for bigger guys.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say bigger, I'm not even necessarily meaning like fat, obese. I'm not even talking about that. I'm just saying a guy that doesn't have a six pack, that
mm-hmm.
doesn't have huge arms and muscular legs and all of that type of stuff. Case in
mm-hmm.
point, there's a guy that I follow on Instagram. I think he's an artist and whatnot. He just did a campaign with, I don't remember exactly which company it was, maybe American Eagle, where it's like clothing and jeans and stuff for bigger guys because he's tall and he's big.
Mm-hmm.
Not fat, not like just that, but he's a big guy, big and tall. Mm-hmm. And it's a huge deal because you don't, and the reason why is not because, part of it is because it's him, but part of it also is because you don't see that.
Exactly.
You just don't see that representation. You don't get to look into a magazine and see a guy that's over 6 feet tall and probably weighs over 260 pounds showing you how some jeans are going to look on your similar frame. You
That's
just
true.
don't see that very often. I also think that it's a slow adoption, and I liken it to how over the past few years, I don't know if you've noticed how men have started to become a little bit more vocal about liking more curvaceous women, bigger women.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in the gay community, it's still lacking. I think
mm-hmm.
that a lot of the love for thick men, again, because it's a buzzword, it is just for the internet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that a lot of guys that like thick men, they keep it behind closed doors. Like, they don't love you in public,
mm-hmm.
but they'll fuck the shit out of you in their bedroom.
That's true.
And then the guys that say they love it in public, when you start to peel back the layers and you dig a little deeper, it's like, well, have you ever even been with a bigger guy, a thick guy? And it's like, oh, I love thick guys. And the other thing, and I thought about this past week when I was seeing some stuff on Twitter, and this is why I feel the way that I feel about thick men not really getting the acceptance that we think that they get.
Mm-hmm.
Because you think about when Kanye came back on the scene maybe 2 years ago, whenever that was, and he had gained some weight.
Mm-hmm.
Now, personally, I knew that was a bigger Kanye than we're used to seeing, but I thought he looked good.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is like the first time I've ever been attracted to Kanye. When he had on that gray, he still looked like he was, about to step into Terminator Apocalypse. Mm-hmm. However, body-wise, I was like, I am attracted to the way he looked. And he looked happy. He was eating his little ice cream, getting his life. And I saw so many gay guys on Twitter just go off. And I know a lot of people will argue that it was jokes, but I want people to stop acting like everyone is dumb and we don't know that most time jokes are rooted in truth.
Mm-hmm.
Because The jokes were relentless, the shade was relentless, and the downright hate was relentless. And the thing that stuck out to me about that is you hated for a celebrity to gain even a smidge of weight. Kanye was nowhere near anybody's fat.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had his moobs. His man boobs grew a little bit. He had a little bit of a belly. But he wasn't just like obese.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he wasn't about to be the next profile that you see on My 600-Pound Life.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see guys go on and on and on about Kanye having gained weight, but then you turn around and you kiki on the timeline with somebody that actually is a big boy. And it just it's very curious to me. And it's like, okay, again, it's that bubble effect of socially, I don't accept bigger men. I don't accept a weighty frame.
Mm-hmm.
But if I know you personally, then it's okay because you the homie. You know what I'm saying? We can go to brunch or whatever the case may be. And I always look at that kind of stuff like, well, how do you really feel about me? Because if Kanye is a fat slob that needs to have his mouth stitched together so he never eats, so he can lose his weight, how do you feel about my fat ass?
That's an interesting point. That's a very interesting point. But all right, so let me ask this in a different way. Let's say that the person they have friends who are overweight. Let's say that this guy is like a gym bunny and he has a group of friends and 2 or 3 of them are overweight or whatever. And his partner is, a gym bunny as well. Are you saying that that's okay? It's just as long as they don't have negative feelings towards the overweight friends, or they're not putting them down? Is that what you're saying?
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay.
Because you can't say just because you have friends that are bigger, then that means you need to be attracted to them. I'm a firm believer in you're attracted to what you're attracted to. Mm-hmm. No one can police or tell you what gets your dick hard or what makes you, what makes you quiver in the back door, whatever the case may be. What makes you salivate? No one can tell you that. However, there is a very fine line. It's not even a fine line. There's a thick line. It's like one of those lines on a train platform. There's a very big, thick line between I'm attracted to this and this is what I date and fat people.
Mm-hmm.
And I always just, in the back of my mind, I question that when you're openly negative about bigger bodies, thicker bodies, fatter bodies, but you have those type of people in your circle. It always just makes me look at it like, do they get some of that fervor that you have, that anger that comes up and bubbles out of you when it comes to a bigger body? Or is it, that's my friend, so I don't even see them as fat, even though they're twice as big as the person that I'm making fun of on the internet? I look at that kind of stuff and it just makes me think is all. Mm-hmm. Because you have to know who you have in your circle. So I always look at that stuff and I wonder, like, do you feel the same way about your friends, or do they get a quote unquote pass?
That's a really good point. Now, I just wanted to clarify. I thought that's what you meant, but I just wanted to clarify. And really quickly, I know we're kind of already launched into this topic or whatever. It's a really good topic. But just for our listeners' sakes or whatever, how would you describe your body type, what you look like physically? So we have an idea.
Listen, I have no problem saying, like, I am a fat boy. And it is what it is. Like, maybe some people would consider me thick because I do, and this is from my doctor. Like, I have natural musculature. Mm-hmm. Like, a lot of people don't think I weigh as much as I do because I don't carry weight the way they think a typical person who weighs as much as I do does. But because I know my body type and I know my family genetics, like, I definitely am a fat boy. Like, I have thick legs, I have thick calves, all of that kind of stuff. I have broad shoulders, but that midsection, that 18-wheeler action. What about you, though?
So I'd say I'm average. My weight has gone up and down or whatever. So, but since high school, it's gone down. So when I was in high school, when I graduated, I was probably about 360. and that was about 10 or so. Yeah, it's about 12 years ago or so. And now I'm about 225, and I'm like 6'1". So,
listen, let me tell y'all something. Listen. When I get back to 225, y'all ain't gonna be able to tell me shit.
Oh my God.
Okay, so let's move along a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you feel about people who arguably don't really fit any definition of thick trying to co-opt the term? Like, why do you think they covet that term?
Well, that's a really good question. Honestly, I think that people who don't necessarily fit the term are using it first off to get attention. I mean, when you think about years ago in the gay community, when we had all these different terms that people use, and this is a chicken, this is chicken hawk, this is a femme, this is a bear. Then we got the muscle bears, and kind of how terms change and evolve. I think that if people want to use the term, personally, I mean, I'm not going to police them and say, you can't use this term. I think that if you can find an angle to work and something to jug and it's successful, then I say do it. I think that specifically in this society, if you can find something that makes you stand out and that gives you a leg up on other people, you're silly not to do it. And that I think if you using that term helps you or whatever, then I mean use it. Now, will people say, okay, you're not necessarily thick? Obviously, they're gonna say that, and you may want to change the term that you use or the way in which you describe yourself. But if you find something that an angle for you, I'd say to work it. That's what I say.
Okay, I'm gonna agree to a degree. I want to say that I agree with what you said earlier about not trying to police people's verbiage, because that's an everlasting and exhausting battle that I just don't have the inclination to try to fight. However, I'm not going to lie and say that if you skinny and you just so happen to have kind of a fat ass, you still look silly saying you thick. And the same thing, like if you are obese, which let me preface this by saying there's nothing wrong with that as long as you are comfortable with it and you healthy and everything is copacetic with you. But if you are clearly fat, and fat does not necessarily have to be negative. Actually, it's not negative at all. It's just a descriptor. But you're trying to say you thick. It's like, come on. Like, love the skin that you're in and all of those preachy type things that to an extent can be helpful, but sometimes they can also be harmful. But I just feel like there's no point in trying to police the verbiage. It just looks silly. Like if you have a 28-inch waist, like come on, let's just be honest. You can say, oh look, I got a fat ass. You don't have to try to say, oh, I'm thick, because immediately it's like, thick where? Thick where? You wear a size small. Like you're a grown man that wears a size small. Own it. Love it. Do what you do. You can shop off the rack anywhere. Why are you trying to call yourself thick? That doesn't make sense. And it's the same thing with a bigger guy. Like, okay, if I'm wearing a 4X, 5X in shirts, I look the fuck stupid trying to call myself thick. Knowing good and well I can't go into the store and just buy stuff off the rack. Like, I just look crazy. And there's nothing wrong with it. There's plenty of chubby chasers and other big boys that will eat you like the buffet that y'all planning to go to after.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with it. It just feels silly to try to co-opt a term that doesn't really apply to you. But again, like I said before, it's a buzzword. And like you said, trying to use it to gain clout and whatnot, yes, that makes sense for people to do it, but to me it doesn't make you look any less silly if you are clearly muscular, you stay in the gym, or if you just naturally skinny, or if you like me and you had one too many Big Macs, or you may have a condition and that makes you a bigger guy. You just look silly.
So that, well, of course, I mean, that's what I agree with that as well. The fact that I wanted to add that in there as well is the fact that, I mean, if somebody wants to use these terms or whatever and it doesn't apply, you're gonna look silly.
Yeah.
But if you want to use it, I mean, I say, use it or whatever.
Yeah. I'm
No,
like,
now, I think about, like, and I hate to bring it back to race or whatever, but when people who say, oh, yeah, like, for example, when they talked about, like, Rachel Dolezal or whatever, she wanted to use the term, say that she was African-American or whatever. And people were like, some people were like, oh, she's done more for African-Americans than other people ever have, and she taught, African-American history and studies and stuff. But a lot of people were laughing at her because
she looks the fuck stupid.
Those braids and that
that clearly Caucasian neck. Like,
yes.
come on. Come on.
And her age is one, and yeah.
Yeah, I had people, even when that happened, quick tangent, and I was like, she doesn't look black. And they were like, well, I have black people in my family that are the same complexion or lighter. And I'm like, it's not her complexion. Look at her features.
Exactly.
Look at her nose. Look at her neck. Like, that is a Caucasian.
That's an entire Caucasian woman. Yeah.
Yeah, it's the same thing with thick. Like, and I know some guys do it as a joke. Let me put that out there. I know sometimes.
Yeah, like ironically, yeah.
You get on Instagram and clearly they in the gym and they got a squat bubble and they're like, ooh, look, I'm so thick. And it's like, ha ha. But some of y'all be serious and you looking crazy out here. But you know what? Whatever floats your boat and finds your lost remote. Shout out to Andre 3000.
I like that. I can use that.
So since I brought it up, let's dig a little bit deeper into the thick versus fat. Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on that? How do you draw that distinction?
Well, let's see. I like both. So just to put that out there first. But thick versus fat, I mean, for me, thick implies that there's some type of musculature, either natural or a person who goes to the gym. I mean, to me, that's basically the definition or the difference between the two. Kind of short and sweet there.
Yeah, I agree. Thick is thick and fat is fat. And again, fat doesn't necessarily have to be negative. But if you are a bigger guy, you just kind of look silly calling yourself thick. Like, own it. I'm a big dude. What's up with the what's up? Mm-hmm. There's allegedly an app for y'all, although I don't know. Listen.
Wait, have you ever used that app? Or
yeah, I've used it, and that's a lot of times where I be coming across the weird guys. They're like, "Hey, sexy, da da da, sexy," and I'm like, I get the sentiment, but it's just not flattering.
Exactly.
It's not flattering, and it makes me feel like you don't really have a lot to say. Mm-hmm. And you're just trying to fluff it. Like you feel like if you stroke my ego enough, then that means you're going to get the stroke. And that's not how I personally operate. I know there's guys out there that love it and they do everything they can to have their ego stroked, but that's not my ministry. But I don't think that there's a lot to say of fat versus thick. I think we all know what's fat and what's thick. Mm-hmm. But I think the conflation comes into whether or not the person is, number one, conventionally attractive in the face, mm-hmm. and number two, whether they know the person personally, and number three, or it could be 2.5, whether or not they like the person.
That's true.
Those three factors play a huge role in how people will look at and call what's fat versus what's thick.
I like that.
Because let's be honest, being conventionally attractive will get you a lot of country.
Oh, definitely.
If you are bigger in the waist.
Mm-hmm.
Just like on the flip side of that, having a nice body gets you a lot of country. Because a lot of y'all out here, and I saw this on Twitter and it was spot on, y'all give a lot of country to a lot of dudes that are butterfaces.
Exactly.
But because they stay in the gym, they have a nice body and they stay with their shirt off, flexing and having pictures in their drawers and positioning they penis just right so that you can see some print. y'all give them a lot of country.
Now let me ask you that, because and that's a very good point. And I was going to tell a story about that, but I'm not, because that would be very shady. So I'm not. I'm going to move on from that. But let me ask you: would you prefer to have an amazing body and a butter face, or an okay body and an amazing face?
I'm taking the face,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not even like a. I don't even. You know what? I'm not even going to try to deny or clean it up. I feel like there's more to be gained with having a nice face as a man than there is a nice body. Like, if I can have a nice face and an average body, I can go far, because listen, there's plenty of men out here that don't have the greatest bodies. They may not be fat, but they just have an average body. But you throw on a suit, oh, you conquering the world, and you cute in the face too. I mean, we have to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
You know, do we live in a world that's not looks heavy? No, we don't.
Exactly.
No, we don't. And it's like you can have this great body and that. Oh God. Okay, I'm gonna say it because someone's probably thinking it. Doubling back to the OnlyFans conversation, there's a lot of OnlyFans on that are butterfaces.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, if you have a nice body and you're willing to do things with it for the consumption and pleasure of others, you get a lot of country.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's wrap this conversation up. And because we're talking about bodies, and you mentioned it, and I thought it was very important to talk about, let's talk about body image just a bit.
Okay, definitely. So there was, and actually I sent these to you, and we might post them or whatever, but just
I'm gonna put them in the show notes.
Definitely some articles that I saw on the BBC website about how being gay, how being a gay man can make your body image issues worse. And basically, the article was centered around this couple who had seen a documentary. I think it was by this lady, and I think it was a lady or a group of ladies. And the documentary was basically about women and their body image issues. And then there was a gay couple, and I want to say they were from Canada. And they kind of replicated that documentary and just talked about the body image issues that they had, basically comparing themselves to other people and comparing themselves as two men in a relationship, comparing themselves to each other. So it was just really interesting. And in the article, they talked about the fact that I want to say that gay men were 3 times more likely to have body image issues. And they just polled some guys on Grindr to talk about different things, just asking different questions. And one of the things that one of the people responded anonymously is what's seen as normal in straight men's world isn't the same with gay men. You can be straight thin, but gay fat. And that's something that we've heard jokingly over the years, that somebody's gay fat. But I think that that's something that's really, prevalent. I think that comes from, and this article does a pretty good job of kind of delving into this, the fact that as gay men, some of us already, or some in general, feel as though that they're rejected or that they're less than. So if they can subscribe to or aspire to this heteronormative, mannerisms in the way that they act and this, ultra masculine appearance, then people will like them and that they'll gravitate towards them. And I think that's a huge part of it. Another thing that I've seen brought up, but that I haven't seen discussed as widely as I think it should be, is the fact that we live in a capitalist society. And when you live in a capitalist society, they have to create, a lot of people who live in a capitalist society have insecurities, because if people aren't insecure or they don't feel some type of need or detriment, I guess you'd say, then you can't sell them products. So if you show them people who are sexy and who are healthy and who have beautiful skin and say, hey, if you use them, people will think, hey, if you buy these products or if you use this service, then somehow you'll look like this. Even if they're not saying it, then subconsciously, that's kind of how people are feeling. And I'll just kind of stop right there. And then there's another part we'll go to on the back end. But did you want to add anything to that?
No, real quick. I agree with what you said. There were a couple of things that stood out to me in the body image article. And the first one was, and I think we've touched on it a little bit during this conversation, that gay men hold themselves and one another to far more exacting standards. Like, we have very, very high standards for ourselves, for each other, and I think for women. Maybe cis het women. Like, it's like, okay, if you're a woman, you got to be put together in a gay man's eyes. And if you're gay, you got to be skinny, or you got to be muscular. Or if you're a big boy, you got to be fashionable. You got to know how to work it. Like, there's so many rules, unwritten rules to so many things. Another thing that stood out to me was a quote that I guess they got from someone on Grindr. And he said, I think body image for gay people is a way of seeking acceptance. It's something that we can control in a way that we can't control our sexuality.
I like that. That's deep. Now, just to kind of double back to something you said, and then we'll kind of go on to this next part here. But you said that gay men have high standards for themselves as well as straight women. As far as the standards that gay men have towards straight women, do you think possibly that could be a form of misogyny? Or what do you think that's born out of?
Absolutely. I think it's a form of misogyny, and I think it's projection. It's probably a lot of it. Like, no one has high standards for cishet men because we know that they're trash. And they buck against, for the most part, as a collective against doing better. But as far as women, like, on one side, there can be misogyny. Like, there's a lot of misogyny within the gay community, just like there's a lot of internalized homophobia, there's a lot of transphobia, there's a lot of racism, all of that kind of stuff. But I think also it's a lot of projection. I think a lot of guys, whether they admit it or not, it may not even be a conscious thing that they're aware of. But I think a lot of gay guys kind of look at women and see themselves to an extent. And so it's kind of like, well, if I was a woman, I would be this, I would be that, my nails would be this, my hair would be this. And so when they see a woman that is, in their opinion, not taking full advantage of womanhood, they judge. It's weird, but it's real. It happens. So the other side of this was about eating disorders.
Yes.
And I believe the statistics said that like 1 in 3 men have some type of eating disorder or have come across some type of eating disorder in their lifetime.
Definitely.
I think the statistics said like 10 million men, something like that.
And it's exactly, and that's a really good point, is it says 1 in 3 men, and that 10 million males at some point in their life are affected by it. It says due in large part to cultural bias, but they're much less likely to seek treatment for their eating disorders. I think about, typically when we think of eating disorders, we think of like rich white girls who, just throw up, who have a little bit of lunch and they throw up, or they don't eat anything at all for days so they can fit into their, cheerleading uniforms or whatever. But the face of eating disorders, that's one side of it. But there's so many different facets of it. There are, and I just happened to this summer be looking into this stuff because I'm a teacher and I'm also studying guidance counseling as well. That's what my next master's is going to be in. So, just kind of doing some coursework and stuff, and saying that African Americans are becoming a huge part of the population that's affected by eating disorders. I think about back when I was in high school, there was this guy named Michael that I really liked. And so he was we went to middle school together as well, so we kind of knew each other or whatever. And so he was on the wrestling team. And I didn't know this at first, but with wrestlers, there's a lot of eating disorders because they have to make weight, so they have to stay in a particular weight class because you're typically trying, all right, I don't want to go up because if I go up, I'll have to, wrestle against the guys who are bigger than me and I could lose, or I don't want to go down because, I'm used to this weight class or whatever. So a lot of those guys had eating disorders, or I'd say I prefer the term disordered eating, because some of them would work out excessively and not really eat much, or some would, carbo load the week before to try and go up to the next weight class. So just all different types of things. But that was just something that was very interesting. Personally, it's something that I have experienced over the years. Not necessarily the bulimia or anorexia or anything, but just binge eating. It's something that I've experienced in the past. And I think even more so that gay men are definitely susceptible to this. Men in general, but definitely gay men. So.
Right. So the way you ended that and phrased it kind of launches me into my thought on that. As far as gay men, I think that there are a lot of undiagnosed eating disorders or disordered eating, because there's a lot of mental health issues. There's a lot of trauma. There's a lot of things that we go through that go unchecked, and they manifest themselves in different ways. And I think a big one that maybe a lot of people don't realize, and honestly, I'm just starting to learn this about myself like in the past year, is that part of my depression and my mental illness issues, they manifest themselves in binge eating. And that's a symptom of it, but it's its own diagnosis, it's its own thing. And I could be wrong. I don't know what the research says, but it just in my observations on Twitter and just being in the community for a few years, I really think a lot of us have those disorders, and they may be rooted in something else, but we still have those standalone disorders. We just don't realize it.
And that's a really good point, is that I don't think that sometimes people know that what they're doing necessarily is, or recognize, better said, that what they're doing is disordered eating. So, for example, I think about growing up. I'm half West Indian and half African American. So my dad was a stay-at-home dad growing up. So he would make us a dinner and snacks, and we would eat at like 5 o'clock. And then my mom would get home, because she was a career woman, and she would get home like 7, 8 o'clock. And she would always bring us, I'll bring you all an order of fries or a milkshake or something else, stuff that we had no business eating at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night as 10-year-olds, and then going right to bed afterwards. But it became, at first it seemed innocent, and it's, I can't be here with you guys, but you finished your homework, so here's a little treat. And then it becomes, hey, whenever you're happy, you want to get something to celebrate, or you want to go out with your friends and eat, or whatever.
It becomes a habit.
Exactly, and it becomes like ingrained.
And that stuff is hard to break as an adult. Listen, I'm still struggling. That's why I said when I get to 225, because right now it is le struggle.
Oh my God, that's funny. Honestly, with this topic, I think that, again, growing up living in a capitalist society like America, that people are going to have issues. But I think that people, as long as they're healthy and they really grow to, and it sounds really cliche, but to like themselves and get to know themselves, then I think that, this will be less of an issue. Because you can have surgeries and you can change yourself or whatever, but at the end of the day, if your core is bad or whatever, if you don't work on that, then you're just gonna have just as many issues. So that's kind of my takeaway from this.
It's like you have to work on your core, and that's not limited to the core of your body, as in doing sit-ups and whatnot in the gym, like the core of your being. Exactly. And you will learn, and it's not easy, but you will learn to accept yourself, and equally as important, to accept others. And my final thought, and we can wrap this up, is that acceptance does not necessarily have to translate into attraction. And that's a whole different can
Oh
of
my.
worms. I know. That's a whole different episode. I'm just saying that you
Mm-hmm.
can accept a bigger guy, a thicker guy, even if you're not sexually attracted. You don't have to tear them down. You don't have to be that guy on Jacked that's like, if you motherfuckers don't put the motherfucking Big Macs down, get a gym membership, bitch, and all this other stuff. You
Yep.
don't have to do all that. You don't have to be all that.
Yeah.
When you are good within your core, the core of your being, then you learn how to accept all different types.
Exactly.
And I'll leave it at that. So, Jamie, again, I want to thank you so much for taking some time out to come onto the show. Like I said, I know you have huge things happening in your life.
Mm-hmm.
So tell people where they can find you.
Definitely. So, well, first off, thank you so much for having me on the show. I really enjoyed this.
Listen, this was a good conversation.
Very, very much so. So you can find me on Twitter. My personal Twitter is 8_9X, and the Twitter for the show is at Arroz Chicken. The website is Arroz Chicken. Instagram, everything is under Arroz Chicken.
All right.
Adios. Bye, guys.
All right, guys. Now, before I wrap this show up, I want to give some shout outs. First, shout out to Rod and Karen of the Black Guy Who Tips podcast for a very successful live show in Charlotte, North Carolina this past weekend. I did attend, did have a blast. Shout out to Deasia and Soso of the Bad and Boozy podcast. It was great meeting both of my CSPNC status, the tall black queens. It was just something magic about seeing them in person. Had a good time hugging on their necks. Shout out to my friend Juanita that drove down from Maryland to spend the weekend when we went back to Raleigh this past weekend. Last but not least, thank you to my good friend Bree for her hospitality and just being a dope friend. We had a blast road tripping to Charlotte from Raleigh. It really was great to see her. It was great seeing my god kids. They're both amazing. My godson definitely reminded me how treacherous it can be to sleep in the same bed as a toddler. But he's cute and I love him, so it's fine. So shout out to everyone. It was good meeting people, taking pictures this past weekend in Charlotte. And who knows, maybe one day I can make something of this little rinky-dink podcast and do something similar, or join one of the podcast conventions and do something that who knows what's in the future. I don't. What I do know is you can go to GaysideStories.com. That is the hub for all things having to do with me and this show. Remember to email your questions to GaysideStories@gmail.com. If you have a moment and you like what you've heard, please go over to the Purple app, Apple Podcasts, and leave a rating. And if you have a little bit of extra time and you really love me, leave a review, 5 stars, please. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this podcast with others. I am very appreciative of everyone that does that. Welcome to all of the new listeners. I see some of you popping up on the Instagram and on the Twitter. Feel free to interact on either platform or on Facebook. I see some of y'all over there too. Remember, you can also find me on Ratchet Ramblings over on the CSPN network, talking about Black reality TV shows. And that's pretty much it for this week. As always, love yourself, whether you're bottom, top, verse, oral only, foot fetish, whatever it is that you identify and you like. Make sure that you are protecting your walls or they will what? They will crumble. I'm out. See you guys next week.